Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of November 2023, which is being live streamed on the Council's website. I'm Councillor Andrew Mickleborough, the committee chair. The committee consists of elected councillors and community representatives. We also have joining us tonight a number of WBC officers and other guests, including I would like to welcome Nikki Cartwright and Leila Johansson, who are from the Health ICB. The role of overview and scrutiny is to provide rigorous, independent, critical friend challenge and to work with the Council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions and makes recommendations to the executive based on the weight of evidence. Agenda item 42, apologies. Thank you, no apologies. Item 43, are there any declarations of interest from members? I don't see any, thank you. Agenda item 44, minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 6th of September. Please note that most of the matters arising should be included in the action tracker on pages 115 to 118 of the agenda pack, which will be considered under agenda item 39. Are there any points of inaccuracy in the minutes of the 6th of September? I don't see. Beg your pardon? Thank you. Okay, so if not, could I please have a proposer and a seconder to accept these minutes as a true and accurate record, proposed by Graham, seconded by Jane. Thank you very much. I will sign these minutes at the end of the meeting, and I promise this time not to forget. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 45 is public question time. I'd like to formally welcome the 5 members of the public who are with us tonight, both online and in person, to ask questions. Your participation is very much appreciated. I note also that the questions tonight all relate to agenda items later in the meeting, and so will, I'm sure, stimulate additional questions and lines of inquiry, and I hope constructive recommendations from committee members when we come to those agenda items. The first 4 questions were addressed to the Executive Member for Children's Services and the first 4 questions to the Executive Member for Children's Services, who, in my capacity as committee chair and in accordance with the Council's constitution, I've invited to respond. The 5th question is directed towards and will be answered by myself. We will take these questions in the order in which they were submitted to Democratic Services. So the first question is from Alexandra Smith. Is Alexandra online? No, okay. So in this instance, what I would like to do so that everybody is aware of what the questions were that were asked and the answers that were given, I would like to, on behalf of Alexandra, in this instance, to read out the question, and then I would like the executive member to respond. I'm doing this because I feel that this will help us enormously, in our discussion of some of the later agenda items. So Alexandra's question was, what is happening for the resource bases, SEND unit plans, and 2 new free schools approved by the DfE that were discussed at the SEND Voices Wokingham annual general meeting in March? Thank you, Prue.
Thank you, Andrew, and I can confirm that a copy of the answer will be sent to Alexandra so that she also knows. So the answer is that with regard to the resource bases and SEND units, in autumn 2022, Strategy and Commissioning Service completed a review of the SEND provision attached to mainstream schools, and the review proposed that the council should repurpose some existing Wokingham resource provision to better meet demand and needs, which were identified in the needs analysis, to create a new type of provision, SEND units, which seek to narrow the gap in levels of support offered by resource bases and special school provision, and implementation of robust accountability, monitoring and review mechanisms. And the current status of all that is that the local authority received early expressions of interest from several schools, but due to complex reasons beyond the control of the local authority, the current mainstream school provider decided not to apply to continue delivering the new resource-based provision. So intensive one-to-one discussions with schools have taken place during the summer and autumn terms. And as a result, we are now expecting or have received formal applications from 4 primary schools to deliver them: Radstock Primary School, Hillside Primary School, Loddon Primary School and Walter Infant School. The panel will consider applications scheduled for the 6th of November. And we can confidently project that we'll be able to appoint a provider to deliver the SEND unit and the resource base at primary level by September 2024 as planned. The challenges are, despite significant work and attempted engagement with various secondary schools across Wokingham, we have not received a formal application to deliver the secondary SEND unit. And this poses an official risk that this element of the project will not be deliverable by September 2024. The next steps are that we will be holding a panel on the 6th of November to consider the applications to run the primary provision, and SEND Voices will be represented on the panel. And once a school host is appointed for each new provision, the commissioning and SEND team will work with the school to mobilise the plans, including any capital requirements to deliver a phased opening from September 2024. And the local authority is currently considering alternative options to deliver the secondary SEND provision and continues to work with 3 schools on how to make the provision viable and attractive propositions for secondary schools. And we still hope to deliver this by September 24. I know that's a long answer. I've still got a bit to go on the free schools, which I think I will continue if that's okay with you, Chair. So in June, the executive approved the location of 2 new free schools at Rook's Nest Farm, just outside Fitch-Hampstead. In August, following negotiations with the DfE, the council were delighted to receive approval for both schools to be increased in capacity from 100 to 120 each. And not only will this bring 40 more much needed places to the borough, but significantly more investment and associated jobs. As we move forward, we will be submitting a proposal to the DfE that the council is in charge of the project to build the schools. We are aware that they have capacity issues associated with RAC issues faced by over 200 schools across the country. So we feel that this route, which is us managing it, offers the best opportunity to deliver the schools for a September 26 opening. Over the next few months, we will be undertaking various site surveys and consultations as we move forward with the planning application. In advance of this, we have already met with a number of contractors who expressed an interest on working with us in the development of the schools. Initial feedback is positive that the schools can be delivered within the anticipated timescales, subject to the DfE decision on which trust or trusts will run the schools. On that note, the other aspect of the schools is who is awarded the opportunity to run them. Following a period of engagement with various trusts in the region, bids to run the schools were submitted in August, and the DfE has confirmed that strong interest resulted in the submission of a number of formal bids for both schools. In November and December, the DfE will review those bids and invite the strongest applications to be interviewed. Our head of SEND, Jamie Conran, will sit on the panel and be critical to the decision on who ultimately runs both schools. Subject to ministerial sign-off, we hope to formally announce the outcome of this in January 2024.
Thank you, Prue. And as Prue noted, Alexandra will receive a written copy of the response. The next question was submitted by Helen Corbett. I can't see Helen online. No? Okay, so we will follow the same format. I will read out the question, and this question is also directed to the executive member for Children's Services who will respond. So question, what are the SEND team doing to resolve the significant issue with communication? I spoke with Prue and Jamie at the local offer live event about this and other issues due to significant concerns regarding the rise in very unhappy Wokingham parents within Send Carers United community. These families have still seen no improvement in communication, and this is not only totally unacceptable, but it contradicts the message being sent to families during the Wokingham Borough Council's progress update at Send Voices Wokingham and annual general meeting in March. Families have lost trust as so many promises never materialise, and the same issues keep happening, i.e., despite it being mentioned several times in the past, parents are still receiving the automatic response emails that informs them that their case officer has left, leaving them with no idea who to contact if there's been any handover. We were also told at the Send Voices Wokingham annual general meeting in March that meetings with parents to ask questions would be a regular feature across the calendar. Yet there hasn't been one in the 8 months following that statement being made. Thank you.
Okay, I won't say hello again, Helen, which is how I was going to ask it. So Helen and I had quite a long conversation at the local offer day, as a result of which I made a lot of notes and communication featured prominently in them. And I know it is a priority area of development for the SEND team. Officers recognise how important it is to maintain dialogue with families, even on occasions where conversations may be challenging or providing a decision that parents and carers may not agree with. The SEND team obviously have a lot of contact with a lot of parents. They do, in fact, regularly get compliments from families who have appreciated the care and support they have received from SEND case officers, who make a tricky process easier to navigate. But we do recognise that some parents and carers have had a different experience. SEND management has noted the contents of the Parent Carer Forum survey 2023, which further illustrates the disparity between excellent practice and areas for the service to develop further. And we want to get to a place where good communication is a consistent feature of everyone's experience. We have a range of activities aimed at supporting and maintaining good quality and consistent communication for all families in Wokingham, such as the SEND management team coordinates training for officers every term or quarter, and communication is a standing agenda item for the SEND management team. A series of You Said, We Did has been planned with the Parent Carer Forum, the first of which will be published on their website shortly. And a local offer coordinator has also recently joined the service and is using the feedback received from the local offer live day to develop the council's own website and version of You Said, We Did. And we see this as a journey which will never be finished, as there is always something more we could do, but we are making progress.
Thank you, Prue. So that was Helen's question. I would just like to note, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, that this is being live streamed, but the recording can be viewed on the council website at any time. And I would hope that all of those who have asked questions tonight and other members of the public will wish to view the recording so that they can see how their questions may have informed lines of inquiry, recommendations that might be made later in this meeting. So the third question is from Maggie Carroll. Is Maggie online? No?
Enough for you all.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So this is, okay, so Maggie's question, thank you, Maggie, is, since WB started on safety valve, please can you provide the numbers by month of the EHCP request to assess, number of no's to assess, number of no's to issue, also the number of way forward meetings and mediation meetings that then resulted in assessment happening and plans being issued. How many appeals were registered, which resulted in a tribunal hearing, and the number of EHCP assessments that have taken place, and EHCPs issued as a result of appeal and tribunals.
So I have some tabular data. I will read it out, but obviously I think it's going to be easier. The answer will be circulated to people and it'll be easier to take it in when I say it. But I will read it out because not everybody online is ever going to get a copy. So it covers the period April to September 2023. So in each of the months, the EHCP requests, it went 26 in April, then May 35, June 35, July 37, August 6, school holidays, September 31. Okay, the number of no's to assess each month, April was 20, May was 4, June was 12, July was 10, August was 10, and September was 5. The number of no's to issue each month, April and May were both 5, June and July were both 8, August was 5, and September was 3. Issuing a plan following way forward meetings, April was 5, May was 2, June was 4, July was 5, August was 3, and September was 5. Issuing a plan following mediation meetings, April was 1, May was 2, there were none in June, 2 in July, 1 in August, and none in September. And issuing a plan following the tribunal, there was 1 in August, and that's all. Okay, that's the information that I've got.
Thank you. I will take a
I
question.
was going to just say, I think
Yeah.
it would be worth explaining the difference between a mediation session and a way forward.
I would if I absolutely could give you that answer. Can you give that answer? Yes. Or Ming, or somebody who would.
Okay, Sarah, could you
One-
just repeat the question?
Well, you have a way forward meeting and you have a mediation meeting. So I think at each stage there are 2 types of meeting, and I actually can't quite remember. Ming, do you remember? Or Jonathan's appeared, he might remember.
Yeah.
Which is after which phase?
Yep. I think the mediation is the last bit before the tribunal.
Tribunal.
Yep.
Way
Okay.
forward is
I think Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Yes, the way
response.
forward meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. The way forward meeting is a relatively informal Wokingham specific approach, which is an early stage attempt to get things back on track with the parent. Mediation is a more formal process, which is a statutory requirement to offer mediation. So a way forward meeting is offered initially. That may be followed, if that doesn't resolve the issue, by a mediation meeting.
Jonathan, could you confirm if that happens after a no for us to assess as well as a no to issue? Because they're 2 key points.
Yes, I believe they are offered. It's more Jamie's. I'm afraid I can't be 100% on that. I'm sorry, but
It's definitely after an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Ming. Okay, Ming, you'll need the microphone.
Yeah. If we say now, or yet we already notifies parent as soon as possible. The conversation continue. How the child can be best support without yes. And again, if parents feel happy, there are some rules for parents to follow. Yeah, but basically we want to make sure the decision be communicated with parents as soon as possible.
Okay, Sarah, could I suggest that you write to Ming, to Jonathan, if you require further information on that matter, and that the response be circulated to all committee members. Thank you. Okay, the next question is from Anwen. Okay, so if you could turn your microphone on, please, Anwen, and welcome to the meeting.
I'm afraid it's a bit of a mouthful, but I've been told I need to read the whole thing. So I have a question about what are the aims and objective of each of the safety valve work streams and projects. And I note they were listed in an update on the 6th of September. They might have appeared in other minutes, but that's what I was looking at. I'm particularly concerned that stakeholder organisations work with parents, so send voices. We're not aware of the detail regarding the work streams and projects, and I just I'm asking the question in terms of a feeling a greater degree of openness and transparency is needed, and yeah, that's my question.
Thank you, Anwen. Okay, and you will have an opportunity to ask a supplementary question if you wish after Prue's response. So you might want to mull that over. Thank you.
I have got an answer, and I'm sure we're not trying to conceal anything. No. Okay. So it's quite a long answer, so I'll read it out very slowly. So there are 4 work streams of safety valve, and we've had some training earlier on this evening about that, with multiple ambitious aims and objectives. Obviously, the work streams are too wide-ranging to give you a comprehensive reply tonight, but I would like to give you a summary of what each work stream aims to deliver and share with you some green shoots at this early stage of our safety valve programme. So the first work stream is early intervention. Through this work stream, we want to address unsustainable increases in requests for statutory assessment by providing improved access to early intervention services as follows. The local offer website and support to increase parental confidence and improve access to information. The early years strategy, so improving support provided to private, voluntary and independent sector early years providers. To implement new SEND support service, including recommissioning and extending specialist outreach for schools. And for this, I'm delighted to report that our new area SENCO was appointed on the 20th of October and will take up the role in January 2024. We've also jointly commissioned a speech and language outreach service in partnership with Bob Integrated Commissioning Board. That's Health, Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, or the other way around, Berkshire West is the last one and Buckinghamshire's first one, providing outreach support from Highwood Primary School, who have a trained specialist teacher. We have also increased investment in Addington Special School outreach and the Foundry outreach offer for SEMH, which is social, emotional and mental health. Sufficiency and new provision is the second work stream. Through this work stream, we want to improve the range of provision and address gaps in local specialist places and reduce over-reliance on expensive independent sector specialist provision by delivering new resource bases and SEND units attached to mainstream schools. And for this project, I detailed progress in my reply to a previous question. Addington Special School expansion. I'm pleased to share with you that the new satellite site at Farley Hill, it says will open in the next few weeks after half term. In fact, it's opened. It's now after half term and it has now opened. It was only held up by bats. Do not ask bats. Very annoying. Oak Tree Special School, which you may share my delight in that we have successfully delivered this new school in partnership with Reading Borough Council, and I attended the opening last month with the Mayor. Special free school bids and implementation. So we've made successful bids for 2 new special schools, which will deliver an extra 240 places by September 2026. And again, I detailed this exciting development in my answer to an earlier question on resource units and free schools. Alternative provision and education other than at school, which is sometimes called EOTAS, review. The project is progressing well with SEND Voices directly involved in the alternative provision remodelling project, and I hope they will feel they're involved in that. Post-16 and preparation for adulthood strategy, which is progressing well in improving access to information and guidance, as well as in developing proposals for new and additional post-16 provision. And the details of that will come out when we have sorted out our needs assessment and gap analysis figures. Then the third work stream is commissioning. And through this work stream, we aim to achieve closer integration with our partners in health and social care. So joint commissioning of therapeutic services and ordinarily available health provision. I've just highlighted the visible green shoots of this project in the launch this term of a speech and language outreach, which is in place in Wokingham, and improved commissioning and contract management of independent sector provision has been implemented to ensure oversight and quality. And the fourth work stream is system and operations. This work stream has the following objectives: to revise the high needs banding framework to ensure consistency, clarity and transparency of funding across all schools, mainstream and special, in Wokingham. Digital improvement to better align our data across finance, operations and school place planning to ensure consistency and minimise duplication and improve planning and control. And finally, to strengthen our multi-agency panel decision making, ensuring that our partners across health and social care are integrally involved in all decisions regarding funding and placements. So that's a sort of summary outline. And I'll stop there and see if you have a supplementary question.
Thank you, Prue. Anwen, do you have a supplementary question? Could you turn your microphone on? Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that summary. So is there any more detail available than that? Because you said that that was a sort of high level summary you're providing. Thank you.
There is an enormous amount of detail available. If you wanted to contact me after the meeting, we can, if you've got questions about specific areas, we can arrange for various bits of information to be given to you. I'm not going to promise you we'll send you the whole thing, because there's a vast array of spreadsheets and costings and things like that. But there is some more information I'm sure that we can give you if you would like some. We'll see what we can find for you.
Thank you, Anwen. So if you can contact Prue with specific sort of areas, of interest, then I'm sure she'll try and accommodate that. And thank you again for your participation tonight. The final question. Oh, sorry, Helen.
Yes, Chair,
Do
thank you
apologise.
very
Yeah.
much. I just really wanted to highlight an event, an information sharing event that is happening, which is being facilitated through Send Voices on the evening of the 8th of November on Zoom at 8 p.m. What we'll be doing in that session is clarifying a lot more detail, much of which has been talked about in passing this evening, but it's an opportunity for more parents across the borough to have this level of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And I'm assuming that that's been really widely publicised. And perhaps, Anwen, if there are any sort of other people in your network, who might be able to participate, I'm sure that would be welcome as well. So thank you very much indeed. So the final question is from Samantha Kellaway. Is Samantha online? No? Okay. So Samantha's question is, please can you clarify where you get your figures from in relation to complaints and compliments? If the compliments come from emails and the complaints from those who follow the formal complaints procedure, this doesn't truly reflect the satisfaction of service users. So many parents have to juggle so much that they don't have the capacity to write a formal complaint, but may have stated their dissatisfaction via general email communication and phone calls. A true reflection of customer satisfaction would involve using the same platforms to obtain data for complaints and compliments. In my opinion, there should be a regular customer satisfaction survey sent to families with simple tick boxes to gauge their feedback in the quickest way possible, but also offering the opportunity to provide further feedback. Formal complaints letters are not something everyone feels comfortable in putting together. So I'm going to be responding to your question, Samantha. And firstly, I'd like to thank you very much for submitting this important question. I'll answer it in the following manner. Where do the figures come from? The figures provided in the complaints and compliments overview are all of those that have been, 1, formally recorded on the Council's complaints and compliments management system solution, and 2, have been handled in accordance with either the statutory children's social care complaints process or the corporate complaints process. Further details of both of these are in the report that accompanies the next agenda item, should you wish further details on that. This will include any complaints or compliments reported to us via any of the following channels: the online complaints from our website, emails outlining feedback sent directly to complaints officers, emails outlining feedback sent to the services to which they relate, letters sent in via post, or verbal feedback provided in discussion, either face-to-face or over the phone or Teams calls. You raise the question of whether this is an accurate reflection of all feedback that the Council receives. As I've suggested above, the data provided in the overview is those complaints and compliments that have been handled within the highlighted complaints processes. Whilst it is accepted that this is not a reflection of all feedback received within children's services, we find that generally, when someone either wishes to raise a concern with us or to give us positive feedback on the services provided, they will tell us about it. In addition to this, the channels by which they can do so, i.e. the complaints processes, are detailed on our website and are accessible via a number of different means. You made a suggestion regarding customer satisfaction surveys. We're always keen to make our services as easy to access as possible for our residents, especially with regard to feedback, as this is essential in helping us understand what we are doing well and where we need to improve. It is accepted that not everybody is comfortable with pulling together formal letters, emails of complaint. The suggestion around the use of a survey could well improve and expand the means by which residents can share their feedback with us. The Council has a complaints working group, which is used as a platform to discuss practices around responding to and managing complaints. Your questions, concerns will be brought up as an item for discussion at the next meeting of that working group, which is scheduled next week, 7th of November. So that concludes the public questions. Once again, I'd like to offer sincere thanks to everyone who's asked questions, which together with the answers provided will, I'm sure, help us considerably in our deliberations tonight on later agenda items, which I hope you will have an opportunity to observe, if not tonight, on the recorded meeting on the website. As earlier stated, details of all the questions, supplementary question, and all answers will be reported in the minutes of this meeting, and all those who have asked questions will receive a copy of the answers that have been provided to your questions. Thank you. So we move on now to agenda item 46, members' questions. Were there any members' questions? No, thank you. So agenda item 47, complaints review. May I ask who is going to be introducing this agenda item? Thank you. I can't see. Who is it?
Michael.
Michael. Okay. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, Chair. Good
And
evening,
Helen.
everyone.
Thank you. Michael, if I could just remind you that all of the members will have seen copies of your report, and they will have read them before this meeting. So if you could just introduce the report and highlight briefly any particular points that you would like to draw to our attention. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Just to introduce myself first, my name's Michael Bateman. I'm the Complaints and Representations Manager within children's services, with my focus being on complaints received via the statutory children's social care complaints process. I'm accompanied by my colleague Denise Penny, who is the Senior Customer Relations Officer within Customer Delivery, and he has a responsibility around lead on corporate complaints. So I appreciate the comment that all members will have reviewed the report, and you know, within that report, what I've done with the first section is just outline some of the key differences between the two processes that we work within, one being the statutory children's social care complaints process and the corporate complaints process. So in terms of just highlighting some of the key information from those reports, so in terms of the volumes that we've seen for the first 2 quarters of the year, they are relatively consistent when compared to the previous 2 financial years. We continue to see cases predominantly be resolved at the earlier stages, so either through informal discussion at early resolution stage, or stage 1, which is cases addressed directly by the services. Where service users remain dissatisfied, they are pointed towards escalation routes, which involves, for statutory social care complaints, independent investigations at stage 2 and at stage 3 panel, and of course beyond that the local government and social care ombudsman. And with the corporate cases, they are referred on to the customer relations team, so Denise's team, to investigate further at stage 2. With the statutory social care complaints, we seen sort of quite a balance in terms of the teams that receive the complaints. So between those long-term social care teams, the children with disability teams and family placement. So there is no real one sort of standout team that is receiving a high volume of cases. They are relatively evenly split. Just in terms of the, we also receive a lot of positive feedback, which I've included some examples of within the agenda item supplied ahead of this meeting. And the number of compliments or formally recorded compliments that we have for social care outweighs the number of complaints that we have, which is of course a positive reflection on the services provided. Just briefly focusing on the corporate complaints side of the report. So on the dashboard, as I'm sure will have been noticed, predominantly the cases that have been received so far in the first 2 quarters of the year have been received by special educational needs. And in terms of the reasons for those, again, it's highlighted within the bar chart, but it's typically around delay in provision of service and communication, which kind of echoes some of the discussions earlier on during this meeting. It is something that, you know, again, as has already been discussed, there is awareness at service level and at leadership level of the matters, and it's something that, you know, the complaint service has involvement with. So we have recently run some training sessions with the SEND team, which have been focused on communication and handling of service user concerns, particularly within the complaints processes. So this is known as the 3 C's training, and it's something that's been delivered corporately. So we've done a bespoke session with SEND quite recently. And we've also recently set up more frequent catch-up meetings with officers within SEND, just as a means of improving oversight of ongoing complaints and providing what support we can in terms of assisting and aiding communication with service users who might have submitted complaints. And yeah, without wishing to go on too much, obviously there's also some compliments that have been recorded within the report as well, which sort of highlights some of the great services that are provided within children's services. A lot of the feedback being around staff being very helpful and approachable, that professional services have been provided, and that teams have been very supportive of families during difficult times, which is obviously a very positive thing to hear back. So yeah, in terms of sort of like summary points, I would say that those are the key things I wanted to highlight. I appreciate this is the first time this report and presentation has been brought to this committee. So if there are any recommendations for improving or expanding on the content to fit the needs of the committee and any members of the public that come along, then yeah, we're more than open to amending it and improving it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, Michael. And if you could also pass on thanks to everybody else in your team who's been involved in the production of this report. I have a question from Sarah in a moment. Is there anybody else wishing to? Okay, and then Anne. Thank you. But before we come to your question, Sarah, firstly, thank you, Michael, for pointing out that this is the first time that the presentation has come to this committee in this format, okay, and for your invitation to members of the committee to think carefully about any wording for recommendations, that might improve future iterations. So if members could just think a little bit about that, okay, that would be really, really helpful. I did myself check the online complaints reporting system, including the online chat and the online form. And whilst I found it quite user-friendly, we have heard tonight that not everybody may do so. So I'd be particularly interested in suggestions from members, any suggestions from members that might help to improve this. We have also had one suggestion from a member of the public via the public questions, about possibility of some form of a different type of survey as well. So if we could keep that in mind as well, as the discussion unfolds. Thank you, Sarah.
Evening, Michael. Thank you very much for the report. It's really well laid out. I found it very clear and easy to read. We have a lot of pushback from our families, and I wondered if you could clarify, because they don't feel that their views have been really represented in this, in the sense that, what do you do with those that complain to line managers or directly email, I don't know, assistant directors and directors, as well with the compliments and the complaints? How are they registered and fed into your system?
Thank you for the question. So again, it's kind of been an exercise of sharing the knowledge around how the complaints process operates, because we do have a system whereby it's highlighted if there is anything that could be classified as a complaint, whether that be within the statutory social care process or the corporate complaints process, that it should be sent via myself or my team. And that way it can be logged and dealt with through the appropriate channels. Yeah, the process is established. It's just a case of officers who are in receipt of those cases then passing it to the correct people so that it can be logged and dealt with within either the statutory social care process or the corporate process.
So just to confirm then, so if a complaint is raised with a line manager and not via the formal complaints process, there isn't an internal reporting system that logs those queries?
So if a case, just as an example, were to go to a line manager of a member of staff who, say, just for example, someone wasn't happy with a member of their team's conduct, then it would be the expectation of that line manager to then pass it on to myself and my team to arrange for it to be logged and handled within the complaints process.
Terry, would you like to add something? Is it directly related to this? Thank you.
Are you then able to break down the figures that you've got to show which have come through the formal complaints process and which have come via emails from officers about complaints? Because I think what Sarah's trying to say is that families are saying that they're making numerous complaints to various officers along the way, and those aren't being logged formally because the officers aren't aware of the process and know that they need to feed it onto you to log it properly. So the figures that you've got aren't representative of the complaints that families are making.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess this ties into the question that was initially raised just before this agenda item around, not necessarily everything being recorded in terms of this report perhaps not being a true reflection of all feedback, which, you know, again, I would accept is quite possibly the case. Everything recorded within the report is something that would be considered a formal complaint, because they are cases that have been handled via those processes. If we have individuals, residents that are saying that there are complaints that they are raising that are, you know, they feel should be dealt with via one of those processes, and they're feeling that they are not being considered appropriately, then I suppose the correct thing to do would be to, you know, I'm happy to be a point of contact, because then I can ensure that those cases are properly recorded, and then they can be dealt with via the processes highlighted.
Would you suggest then that if families feel that complaints aren't being addressed, that we CC you in, we ask them to CC you into any communication that they might have with officers, so that you can then log it as a formal, as a complaint?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
Okay.
if there is anything where someone wishes to make a formal complaint, and perhaps you know, a response, either if it's the first initial communication, or if it's a follow-up, then yeah, I can be CC'd in, and it can be logged via the processes that have been highlighted.
Could you confirm what that email actually is, so that we make sure it's the right email that goes to, or it goes to the right email rather?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
So it can either come directly to to my email address, which is michael.bateman@wokingham.gov.uk, or we have a Children's Services Complaints mailbox, which is Children's Services Complaints @wokingham.gov.uk.
So just to clarify, so that's some of the feedback that we've received from families since the papers went live. And of course, they missed the deadline for the question time. And we've received quite a numerous number of emails saying that they didn't feel that the figures represented the number of times that they had raised issues. And they're asking us for clarification on what the right process is and whether there's internal systems.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. Prue, do you have a response? And then I'd like to say
I
something
just
before we.
say that there's a difference between one person complaining multiple times about the same thing and different people. So it's quite possible they've complained multiple times about the same thing. It's classified as one thing. Yeah, and I don't know. And I think we'd welcome that sort of clarity, because I think it's important.
But equally, when a family raises that issue with a line manager, depending on whatever level that is, in their heads, the families are believing that they're raising a formal complaint, when actually it may not necessarily hit your system.
That is our expectation, and we do need to track that through to make sure that it is happening.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, you know, that data does need to be logged. Okay, so I am going to suggest a recommendation that may, you know, help with that going forward. I'd also like to pick up on your point, Sarah, very, very important point, you know, about sort of the processes that are being followed. And Michael, I think besides the really important quantitative data that you have in this report, it could be very useful in the next annual review for possibly a couple of anonymized summaries of complaints that trace the process with timings from when the complaint was first logged to its resolution, so that we can actually get a better feeling, you know, of what the complaints were, and actually how they were dealt with. So that's just a suggestion, okay, possibly for the next annual review. Terry, and then Anne.
Could we also ask that the complaints process, whether it's children's services, the children's social care one, or the corporate complaints, or whether they're one and the same now, because I think that might be confusing for some people, is available on the local offer? Because it's not actually on the local offer, it's on Wokingham Borough website, but it's not on the local offer website.
Okay. Any comment either, well, from anybody? Michael, Prue, Ming? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we are in the process of developing a bank communication. Yeah, that's something we started to do. So this is one of the things very useful. We will pick up. I think what I heard is definition of complaint. Sometimes when manager received the letter, they think you just follow up, trace up, not necessarily forward to Michael as a formal complaint. And so having heard what the parents said, what the parent voice group said, so we need to lock this. We have always been lock those communication from the parent, but not necessarily some of the communication we treat it as a complaint. We treat it as a complaint when parents specifically say this complaint, or we read the nature of the letter sound like a complaint, not to follow up the cases. So we want to make it clear that we want to co-produce that with same voice, our communication plan. We just started doing this.
Sorry, may I just add a little bit to that?
Yep.
I think it'd be really useful because we're not saying that we want families to make a formal complaint if they haven't heard within 5 days, at the first ask. We're saying that it's really unclear, that process around if they've sent in multiple emails and they still haven't heard when they were expecting to hear within 5 to 10 days, and it's 30 days and they still haven't heard anything and they've sent several chasing emails. What do they then do? And at what point would that classify as a formal complaint? So I think it's really unclear to our families that when they raise it to the assistant team managers and then to the line managers and then to where that actually reaches the formal complaint process and hits this log. And I think we just need to clarify that process and where we would expect things to go and when and timescales.
And you're happy that this could be included in this communications, sort of co-produced communications?
We really welcome that.
Excellent. Prue?
I was just going to say it would be much better, obviously, if there are expectations for when your email gets answered. We would rather do without the complaints of not having answered the email. So that's part of the send communication plan as well.
Thank you. Anne, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. On page, it's the statutory social care dashboard. What page is that? It says number of complaints upheld is 3, but at early resolution there are 17 and at stage 1 there are 14. So I was just wondering, it seems a very small number of complaints that are upheld. So what's happened to the rest of them?
Thank you for the question. So in respect of the figures that we report on, the complaints upheld, and it possibly is something that I could have made clearer in this presentation, so apologies for that. But it focuses on those that are within sort of from stage 1 onwards in the process. I just wanted to use the dashboard as a means for highlighting the number of complaints that had been upheld, so where we had taken action. On the slide after, which is sort of the analysis of data and actions, just under analysis of social care data, there's just a comment around the remaining stage 1 cases, which just outlines, so we typically have sort of 3 outcomes that we report on, which is where a complaint is upheld, where all elements of the complaint and the sought resolutions are agreed with and actioned. And we have partially upheld, which, as suggested, it's cases where some elements of a complaint have been upheld, but others haven't. And then not upheld, which is where we do not feel sort of that any of the complaints that have been raised would be upheld. So in terms of the data around the stage 1 cases, that's recorded there. Perhaps with future ones, it could be done in a slightly more logical manner in terms of including that data on the dashboard altogether. But yeah, so the data is there. And then with regard to the stage 2 cases, we don't have anything to report on as of yet because those cases are still ongoing at present. But we anticipate by the time that we get to the next reporting cycle, we'll have outcomes to report on those ones.
Sorry, which is regarding the corporate complaints dashboard, you've got number of recorded complaints 21, but you've got early resolution 28, stage 1 31. So So what does that mean, that all the other complaints were unrecorded?
So that's on page 30 for members.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, so the
What, sorry? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's my mistake. Sorry, forget that.
Okay. Easy enough to do. Any other questions at all, Anne? Thank you. Okay, Richard.
Thank you. On slide page 31, I'm not quite clear in the text next to the scales where you say the increase in complaints has been around greater scrutiny of assessment requests. Is that saying everything's slowed down because you're spending more time on each application, or is that saying that things that would have perhaps been funded before are not being funded any longer because of the budget issues?
Thank you for the question. So I will say that in respect of the content that's been included here, it was sort of driven through discussions that I've had with specialists within the SEND service. So beyond the content of what's included within the report, I probably wouldn't be in a position to expand on it much further, but I would be able to take it out of this meeting and have a discussion around that particular query with the specialists within the service, if that would assist.
Ming, is there anything that you could add at this point, or would you be happy, Richard, to get a written response to this question? Is there anything you'd like to add, Ming? Okay, so Michael, if you could follow that up.
Yes.
And once again, Lucian, if we can ensure that the response is circulated to all members as soon as it is received. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, I have a couple of questions and then suggestions for some possible recommendations. I did note that the online form provides opportunity to collect important data on equalities relating to users. I'm not sure who this question's directed to, and it may indeed be an answer that will need to be given in written form after the meeting. But are there any service users who any of the members of children's services, the officers, feel may be currently underrepresented in this data? And if so, if there are any groups who are underrepresented, are there any measures that have been implemented to reach out to these groups? And I'd also be very interested with if Send Voices, has a view on this matter. So officers first. Helen?
Chair, I'm going to suggest that we take the question away and come back with a response, unless Michael's in a position to answer the question. But I think it's a level of challenge. I think that we need to go away and reflect and provide a written response. Thank you.
Certainly. I still would like to hear any comments from Sarah.
I think it was Helen, wasn't it, in her question, said that a lot of families are very frazzled, and if they're not receiving the service that they're expecting, it can be a big ask to then sit through and work through all the timelines and exactly what went wrong where and which officer it was that they didn't get a response from. And it takes, if you've got your caring needs, it's a lot of extra effort and writing, and you have to have a certain skill set and the process has to go through. So I do think some simplification, and I think maybe the Send what strategy it was, or that Ming was talking about around communication, would actually really help with that process. And if it could be simplified as much as possible so that the onus isn't too much on the parents to actually put in too much information.
And just to clarify, do you sense that there are any underrepresented groups within Send Voices, who are not who are finding communications difficult?
I think there's two parts to that. Is that they're exhausted, and there is also what's the point of complaining because they don't feel anything changes. So we are hearing an awful lot of that. Is that we've complained, we've raised issues, we've talked to different people, and we've been promised things, and it doesn't happen. And then so what's the point of doing a formal complaint? And then you have the accessibility side of it and the time, which is a slightly. It's not a simple one fits all, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any further questions? Andrew?
Yeah, I just wanted to have a question which sort of links onto that and sort of links onto Richard's point. Regarding sort of length of complaints, obviously there seems to be sort of quite a stark increase in complaints, which is noted in terms of the sort of time it's taken to resolve things. Partly which Richard touched upon, which I know will be answered a bit later. My question really is, in terms of the action points with this, on that slide 31, so it's talking about service delay, and some of the action points are sort of, provide services that are outstanding and outline actions to reduce likelihood of reoccurrence. And I'm wondering whether, I'd like to think we'd all want services to be outstanding and things, but I wonder whether are there things which are being done to help reduce that? What are the things that can be done to help reduce that time limit? Because I wonder if there's anything specific there.
Okay, who would like to respond to that? Ming, thank you.
Okay, I can just partially answer your question, Andrew. I mean, it's the whole system things. It's when we said that we committed to listening to community, to parents, children, young people, campaign forming part of that informed the way we work. For example, we heard parents said that the process may take longer than expected. We realign our resources. One example, Asian psychology resources for assessment to make sure we achieve 20 weeks assessment with high quality plan in place. So to answer your question, our work are informed by the feedback we get from the complaints. It's a very, very important part of the big jigsaws to inform our approach. Yeah, it's not just about dealing with complaints, it's about inform our service. Yeah, but we can. It's a journey, but we can do more. Yeah.
Andrew, do you have anything to add? No? Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, so what I'd like to do is to suggest a number of recommendations on this agenda item. The first recommendation is that the committee thanks officers for the production of this report. And notes that there have been a number of suggestions made, okay, about how future iterations of the report might be tweaked. Okay, now those suggestions will all be encapsulated in the minutes. So it's a thank you and a note that we have made some suggestions, for further development of the next annual report. The second recommendation is that the committee supports the activity involving co-production with Send Voices of a new communications is it strategy or process? Plan. Okay, so that we note and support, okay, the co-production with Send Voices of the new Send Communications Plan. Is everybody in agreement with that? Thank you. The third recommendation flows out of one of the public questions that was asked tonight, and that is that Children's Services, or it could be Michael's team, in conjunction with Children's Services, obviously explore possibilities for developing a survey that could be used to improve and expand the means by which complaints and compliments relating to SEND are fed back by the public. So it's just a request, okay, to explore possibilities for developing some form of survey. Would people be agreeable to that in principle? Yep. So they were the 3 recommendations that I felt came out of this agenda item. Does anybody have any other recommendations? Sarah?
Sorry, Terry highlighted about the compliments and complaints being also available on the local offer, so that the process was actually highlighted on there as well.
Thank you. Okay. Would everybody be in agreement with that? Okay, so that's a 4th recommendation. Okay, that the complaints and compliments process, okay, be available through the local offer on the council website. That's in addition, I'm assuming, to its present location. Thank you. Sorry for not picking that up. Okay, well, thank you very much, Michael, for your attendance tonight. Very much appreciated. The next agenda item is item 48, the draft SEND strategy. Who will be introducing this?
Chair. Yeah, I will start. Jonathan will give detail.
Okay, Ming, if I can remind you, as I do remind everybody, okay, that we have all seen the documents. Thank you very much. So if it's just a question of introduction, okay, and highlighting any key points. Thank you.
In that case, I will just let Jonathan to go through the introduction of that. Just one thing I would like to say that within this presentation, we will leave time for same voice to present the same voice parent surveys outcomes. Jonathan, go for it.
Thank you,
Good
Jonathan.
evening, everyone. Actually, I mean, the presentation was circulated, as you said, so rather, I don't know that reading through it is necessary. I probably would want to draw your attention to certain key features. The SEND strategy requires an update because we're in the final year of the previous strategy, which ran from 2021 and was largely developed in response to the written statement of action following the poor SEND area inspection. We recognise there have been such a significant number of changes in the recent past, particularly arising from Safety Valve and all the activity that's arising through Safety Valve. So we felt it was timely to update it. We're very keen that this document is developed in jointly. I've been working with colleagues in SEND Voices and also from the Me Too Club around young people's, to ensure we get young people's voices also reflected in the final document. I would say in the document that was circulated, unfortunately, it omitted. I will add a little supplementary information because it mentioned the survey that had been carried out by Me Too, but omitted feedback. So, with if members will indulge me, there are 2 steps. It might be useful to have Terry or Sarah from SEND Voices to perhaps reflect on some of the feedback from parents and carers, but I would also do that for young people because I think there's some really relevant and valuable feedback. And then I'll summarise what we see as the kind of key issues that we're trying to ensure get picked up and reflected in the new strategy, and then set out the timeline. I mean, the timeline's in there, but we are kind of have a working version of the document that we're kind of putting together and synthesizing all that feedback from different areas. There's also been a lot of feedback from schools, which was there in the presentation. But before I hand over to Terry or Sarah, if they do wish to take the opportunity, I would probably like to summarize some of the headlines from young people in terms of what they were what they've been telling us. I mean, broadly speaking, the view was that the priorities we've identified are the right ones from a young person's point of view. I think we had to do some work to translate that into language that young people would recognise and reflect and use their own language. But there were were certainly some gaps and some omissions in terms of what young people were saying we could do. There were a number of things they said we're doing well, but also a number of things they said we were not. Perhaps we need to raise the bar on. One of which was that more than half of them said they wanted, interestingly, given the current themes of this evening's meeting, and they felt they wanted better communication, particularly in terms of transitions and that longer term planning for young people's futures. I think they felt they didn't necessarily have early enough insight or information about what opportunities might be available to them moving forward and preparing for adulthood. A surprisingly high number, 32.7%, said they didn't currently attend a local school or college they felt met their needs. Now that's an alarmingly high number. I think we certainly need to pay attention to that. And obviously, our broader strategy is to recognise we don't have the right mix of provision locally, and we're including in that a component of developing new post-16 provision. So there'll be a better mix of provision, but we can't ignore or walk away from the fact that currently around a third of our young people with SEND are saying that they don't feel the current provision meets their needs fully. And they felt that some of the changes that could be required are actually relatively simple to put into place. It's not necessarily financial barriers getting in the way. So I think there's more we can do with our providers to address some of these issues, because they're asking for things like, some of the themes were more transition days or earlier transition days for young people and pupils with SEND, because they sometimes find engaging with some of the transition days for mainstream pupils rather overwhelming and hard to navigate. And they wanted sort of better a wider range of arrangements to be in place around transition and planning for what their next step might be beyond their school placement. So I think that's, again, not too hard to implement. And more information around the timetable before the first day of each. Many of them don't like arriving in school not knowing what they're going into at the beginning of term. So some of that preparatory work before starting term. So these are simple things to address, and I think we can do a lot with our providers to address some of these. Communication information were the key issues. Better support to mainstream schools. I think there were some that felt that mainstream could do a better job of adapting to some of their needs, particularly around some rigidity, around some of the aids and strategies that they felt would be enable them to attend mainstream, which again we can pick up in some of our new raft of training and support for our mainstream schools. And this is a key issue, and I know this is also reflected in feedback from schools and from the Parent Carer Forum. I'm sure they'll echo this. The feeling was that we need a better range of mental health support for learners of all levels of need. There is a real issue, a thematic issue that keeps cropping up in all the feedback we've had. I know it's reflected in the presentation I shared, but it's also echoed by young people's feedback around support, around mental health, around what we call it, the current terminology is educationally based school avoidance. Those are young people who remain highly anxious about coming back into school post-lockdown. Many young people haven't still come back into school post-lockdown, and mainstream schools are all telling us that's an issue for them, and for young people are telling us the same, this is an issue. So I think there's more we can collectively do around support, around mental health needs, around anxiety, around difficulties adjusting back into sort of routines that were commonplace before that break in many young people's education. I think we want the strategy to ensure we pick up on that, and I know that's again reflected in the feedback from parents and families and from schools, as I say. The other issue that sits outside safety valve, but it certainly needs to be embedded in the strategy more widely, is access to a wider range of opportunities. This is not just about education, health or social care. We have to ensure we're also looking at our leisure opportunities and wider access to sort of community activities that many young people consider commonplace. And we're getting feedback from our young people saying that they sometimes feel excluded from some of that activity, and we can do more to ensure they have access. Probably a good juncture to ask Terry or Sarah whether they wanted to reflect some of the highlights. I could have done it for them, but that seems rather rude. So I'll hand over to them to sort of perhaps pick out some of the highlights in terms of feedback from parents and carers. Again, these are the things we're trying to synthesize into the strategy to ensure it doesn't feel like a council strategy about our education provision. That's a wider thing that reflects the needs of the wider area and really embeds the voice of young people within it. So Terry or Sarah, I don't know whether you want to take a few moments.
Thank you. You know, we'd always have something to say, Jonathan. You'd never get away saying it for us. Terry's going to talk about the survey because she
Terry,
led on
thank
that.
you.
Yeah, no, we were really pleased again. We got 408 responses from a wide range of ages and SEND needs, and all the details are in the links that have been sent out, so I won't go through it in detail, but just pick out a few key things, some of which echoes exactly what Jonathan says. For example, he was talking about a third of the children saying that their needs weren't met. We got 44% of families said that their educational needs were very well or quite well met. So half the families are saying that the needs are not well met. So yeah, we were echoing exactly the same things. Community activities, the rating had dropped this year, and only 28% said that, you know, that there was quite or very well met in terms of community activities. Mental health, again, was one of the things. I don't think it's all COVID, Jonathan. I think a lot of it is to do with schools not meeting young people's needs. We hear an awful lot from families, and that's echoed in the survey about ordinarily available and graduated response not being done in mainstream schools. So for lots of young people, why they don't want to go into school is because, you know, there isn't the adjustments made in terms of what uniform they can wear, or that they're, you know, not helped between lessons when it's very noisy in a corridor, those sorts of things. So it's not some of it is legacy from COVID, but a lot of it is to do with ordinarily available and reasonable adjustments that mainstream schools aren't making, and that is driving an awful lot of the EHCP needs requests, because it's the only way that families can get the needs of their children met in school. The other thing that we learnt from the survey in doing some other bits and pieces is that when we started looking at the results for special school versus mainstream, we did start to see some quite significant differences. For example, when you asked, is your school well resourced? For those that have children at special schools, 85% said yes. In mainstream, it dropped to 48%. So, and if we look at sort of needs identified in terms of a score out of 5, 4 out of 5, or it was rated 4 by those with a special school, but only 3 for those at a mainstream school. And we've got some other figures, and next year we want to look at much more detail. But again, we're seeing that, you know, for children that are in a special school, their needs are being identified and met really well. Whereas for those in mainstream, it comes back to this ordinarily available and graduated response, and needs not being either identified early enough or needs not being met. Information is still really hard to find for families. They're still saying that they struggle to find information. Preparing for adulthood rating fell this year, as did the rating for Wokingham's transport service. That's not the taxis, that's actually the service provided by the CTU team. And, you know, we're still more than happy to help with any wording on letters or anything like that. We've not had any contact from the CTU team asking about that, but again, reiterate that we are more than happy to help with anything like that. It's been a really rocky start to the academic year this year, and our survey showed that parents are saying that they're feeling less fit and healthy, and their anxiety levels are really raised. And then they've come back in and they're having issues with, as has been highlighted and numerous times during the evening, you know, communication, and that is only making things harder and more tricky for families. And we're really pleased that things like the SEND communication plan are in place, and, you know, we've got the Zoom update on the safety valve next week. But what parents really want to know is how that communication on an individual level, you know, how many days is it going to be before they get a response to their email? And if they do escalate it up a level, you know, when is it going to get resolved? Because we're hearing an awful lot from families about, you know, they've been waiting months for email responses. No one responds to telephone calls. They're promised to call back on Friday and they still haven't heard a week later. So we're getting lots and lots of those individual communication issues being raised, and that's the communication thing that that's going to make a difference to them.
I think the other thing to highlight is around special schools as well. So if we take Addington, It's amazing. We never hear anything about Addington. Their process through the annual review process, preparing for adulthood, and the whole thing is it's streamlined. They do it every day, and they do it exceptionally well. And I think the gap between the mainstream schools and the specialist schools like Addington has become more marked, and I think that difference is becoming increasingly important.
Okay. Thank you. Can I step back in at that point? Is that all right?
Yep.
Yes, certainly.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Terry.
It's hard to read the room through the monitor. So, I mean, hopefully, what everyone will hear is that we are many of those issues. We feel we have measures in place that will begin to impact and begin to improve things over the coming year. And we really, we're at the early stage of this sort of improvement journey, funded and supported through all the safety valve activity. But we also need to recognise that there's still some way to go. And I think we would all acknowledge that. Hopefully what everyone can hear is that we are working very closely to ensure that this strategy is something that's owned and shared across all partners, that schools feel it reflects their views, that parents and carers feel it reflects theirs, and it also holds at the heart of it the ambitions and views of young people, and sets out the agenda as to how we're going to address those things. There is still a little way to go. We are on course, broadly speaking, to have a working draft for a consultation. We'd like to bring that back to this group at the next opportunity. As I say, I'm working closely with Send Voices. We've gathered a lot of information from schools over the last couple of months, and that also needs to be kind of embedded and reflected in the strategy. But we are progressing well, and think we're going to have something in the next, certainly this side of Christmas, in order to share more widely for approval. We're suggesting the timetable would be that we go through a formal public consultation on that in the new year, once we've got sign off, and that will become the document will be approved and ready to implement, ready for the next financial year. That's the timetable for this. Any questions at that point? Any questions or queries or anything I can?
Yeah, Anne, and then I'd like to.
Yeah, sorry, it may not be quite on the subject. It's just it's what you said about 32% of SEND children not attending a local school. Do you know what percent of SEND children are actually not receiving any education at all?
Oh, no, it wasn't that they're not attending a local school. Sorry, it was that they are saying they don't feel the school they're attending currently fully meets their needs. Now, in a number of instances, we think those are through relatively easy to implement shifts and adjustments that can bring that figure down markedly. That's not about attendance by any means. No, that would be that's about the feedback from those young people. The 52 young people that responded, a third of those felt that the school they were attending didn't fully meet their needs. I must say, one thing we feel is that this is a fairly select group, and I think we want to almost widen. I think we need to widen our sampling, to ensure that we're getting perhaps there may be more work to do in terms of having a more reflective view of whether that's a view shared across all those children with SEND support, for example. We don't know that to be the case, but certainly those that were engaged in this at this stage and this level of consultation, that's a fairly high proportion who feel more could be done in their schools, largely in their mainstream schools, I have to say.
All right, well that sounds quite hopeful. But do you know what percentage of SEND children are actually not receiving any education? It sounds as if it must be quite a low percentage. Because I mean, to judge from some of the comments from the Send Voices survey, there certainly seem to be at least 1 or 2 children not at school.
There is a growing number who we've mentioned earlier this evening. What we term education other than at school. Those are that's slightly different to home education. It's parents who currently feel school is unable to meet their child's needs and have wrapped a package of support around their child. That number is relatively low, but has been growing. And we are reviewing why that's been growing, and we think we're going to have a range of measures in place around some of the work. One of the work streams we're working on currently very actively will begin to ensure that we can meet more needs in school rather than parents feeling the need to withdraw their children from a formal school placement. So it's relatively fairly low numbers, but something we're paying attention to, I'd say.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Terry, do you have something to add on that particular point? Thank you. And then Jane.
Yeah, there's also a cohort of young people who are possibly sat in a mainstream school, but it's been identified that they need to move to either a resource type base or a special school. So they would probably need to be included in that number of children that are in the wrong placement. So that there is a number of those.
Thanks, Terry. Jane?
Yeah, so early years has been talked about a lot tonight and comes through quite strongly in the strategy. But the other key transition point I would guess is preparing for adulthood. And the figures are really low and quite scary. And I'm taken back to the meeting a few meetings ago where Young Voices came in and shared their concerns about not being taken seriously for pathways to. I just question whether it's strong enough in the strategy is it a project or should it actually be a priority?
Can I come back on that?
Yeah,
Yes, please. Yep.
It is a project. There's been a lot of work in this arena. I mean, it's not so much reflected in this presentation, but we are conscious that the advice and guidance around preparation for adulthood is not where it needs to be. We are working on improving that, but also the local provision is not quite where it needs to be. As you'll be aware, we have no FE mainstream providers within our boundary. We do have a fairly good range of supported internships, but we are seeking to widen that out to have a wider range of options around routes into employment. We are certainly looking to improve and broaden our range of other pathways into further education. And I think it is certainly a priority. Maybe it doesn't come across well in this presentation, but it's certainly, although it's not one of the, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I think as you'll see in the fully fledged document, it'll have a fairly more substantial. Won't be centre stage, but certainly one of the key areas, as you say. We're more than aware that it's an area for growth. It's the one remaining area for improvement that still prevails now, following the our written statement of action. We are still working on some of those areas for improvement. The DfE haven't quite signed off our improvement plans, but we believe they will at the next meeting. So it is improving, but you're right to highlight it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. Just before we come to Sarah, I was going to I will be making a recommendation that we invite the WBC transition team, which is part of adult social care, to participate in a meeting of our overview and scrutiny committee to explore transition arrangements and how these could be strengthened. So I will be making that recommendation later. Okay, Sarah, and then Terry, and then Graham.
Oh, yes, Jonathan, I was going to mention that Preparing for Adulthood has been part of a working group for a long time, since 2018, our written statement of action, and it's been following through. But transition is more than just the Preparing for Adult team. And I think that's the bit that is really being missed and the families are really struggling with. It's those that aren't necessarily our SEND support and those that are at mainstream schools. So like we were saying before, like Addington, they have a really well set up system and they have good connections with social care within Wokingham, and that transition works usually really, really well. It's those other individuals that don't have those links or aren't able to access adult social care, because there is a difference between over 18 and under 18 and children. So it's really important that that transition is the one that we do need to strengthen hugely.
Thank you. Terry, did you have anything to add on that? And then Graham.
Yeah, it was just exactly what Sarah had said, that the transition team only cover that very small cohort of young people that will move from children's social care to adult social care. So there's a great big wodge of children that sit in mainstream schools that will never be eligible for adult social care, and that's the cohort that really needs to have this Preparing for Adulthood focus on them.
I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that it's not just children with SEND that we're not doing very well with on preparations for adulthood, and that's why the new the Children and People's Partnership has got Preparing for Adulthood now. Don't think we've phrased it exactly like that, but that's what it is, as one of the priorities for young people as a whole in the borough, because we need to strengthen that area of work.
Thanks for that's really helpful. Graham.
Yeah, I'd like to draw attention to page 63, because our key partners, there's been a lot of talk about mainstream schools participating, getting data from them. I've heard that a lot, getting data from them. on page 63 here. I might be missing something and misread it because I'm a bit tired. On the review and co-redesign of SEND partnership arrangements, I don't see mainstream schools on that page. Perhaps they are represented somewhere, but I'd like it to be explicit, and perhaps I've missed it.
Yes, mainstream school. When we redesign this, we work with St. Boys and other partner. Mainstream school are very important. We make sure secondary school have a representative truly represent all school and truly will bring the voice into this group. Also can disseminate and message, take action back. So that being work on. We already result. We have one primary school representative, one secondary school representative for mainstream school, as well as a special school attendance teacher. They are in the board.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, and I think that's a perfect example. I'll come back to you in a second, Sarah. I think that's a perfect example of what I'd like us to move on to in just a moment, and that is the overview function of this committee. We've got an opportunity now, to have some further input into the development of this strategy. Jonathan has kindly sort of outlined a likely sort of timings, for the remainder of this process. I would like, if possible, for the next iteration of this strategy, to come back to our meeting in January. I think it's January the 8th. Okay, and I think that in a moment, we can probably add quite a few sort of further comments, ideas, suggestions as to how little tweaks might be made to the document that we have before us. Okay, Sarah.
I would also, looking at the partnership arrangements and the governance structure, I think it would also be helpful to not just understand who's in which groups. I know, Jonathan, I know most of this, but also how frequently these individual groups meet. So, for example, the SEND Partnership Board meets quarterly, but I'm not even sure the SEND Assurance Board has met yet. And I think it would be helpful for the Scrutiny Committee to understand how frequently the different boards meet and how they feed into each other.
That would seem to be very helpful. Thank you. Okay, Graham?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow on from that, Sarah. I wouldn't necessarily want to see the frequency, but more the roles and responsibilities of each of those groups, so that it's focused and not, duplicating, and that they're interdependent groups. Rather than chaos that could emerge.
Okay. I know these points will be being noted, okay, and feed into the process. So, Ming?
Actually, very good question. We at least the new arrangement, we want to make it more robust, and we recognize that it's very important. Just this week, we have worked with local offer team with the turnout reference and the function, the purpose of each group will be published on the local offer. I think they tried to load it today, but they want me to send a different version. Definitely, we can share with the member about turnout reference of each group. They're already there. Internal whether assurance group or we met or not yet. I think they're going to meet next week. They're arranging a meeting. I understand next week. Out of my head. I know we are arranging that.
Thank you for that.
So just to let you know, Ming, we're meant to be part of that because it says co-production, which is our bit, and we haven't actually had any correspondence on that I'm aware of.
Well, they're not internally. We will arrange the Saturdays. Yeah, I'll make sure I'm sure you'll be contacted. I know from our admin team, they are planning this meeting. Yeah.
Okay, Ming, if you could follow that up, that would be grand. Thank you. Ian?
Thank you. You can go to page 41, please. It's titled Local Context. I may have missed something here. We're down in the weeds a lot tonight, so I'm going to try and bring us back to something here. It says working current has an EHCP rate of 3.6 compared to an average of 4.3 in all English unitary authorities. Still not actually sure whether that's good or bad. It goes on to say Wokingham's well within the bottom quartile of all the local authorities. Again, good or bad, and why are we down there? Is it good or bad? I don't know.
I think
Yes.
that needs a, I think it's because historically, and I'm going back a long time, our system was not easy to navigate, and we didn't have a very good, we went through a period when we had a number of interim DCSs and the SEND team got squashed and squashed and squashed and squashed down until they were not able to deliver a decent service. And that has artificially restrained the number of EHCPs and things and the interaction that's happened. And now that since the exposure started, so 2018, 2019, it's been coming back up. And so that's why the HCPs are increasing dramatically. We're catching up with where we ought to have been with the accidentally suppressed demand. And Graham's nodding. I think it was a function of a period that the council went through, and now we're doing better. We are catching up, and we will probably get somewhere near the national average. I don't know whether we'll definitely be the right, because every council area is different, and you won't necessarily be average, but that increase, that pace of acceleration is a reflection of the fact that actually our service is starting to operate in a reasonable way. There's bound to be a lot of difficulties and more complaints because people's expectations start getting raised and all those kind of things. And we've clearly got a long way to go, but it feels like we've started on the right journey, and that's why that is coming back up.
So as time goes on, we will see that 3.6 coming up to better reflect the average of 4.3, and we won't be in the bottom quartile anymore.
I would suspect so, although we are doing our best not to let it come up to that by addressing the things with early intervention.
Do you mind if I come in?
Yeah, I think Ian's point, though, is if there could be just sort of some acknowledgement that that it's likely that there have been considerable unmet demand or hidden demand in the past, that depressed those figures. So, Jonathan, and then Andrew.
In some, I mean, in some ways, if you look at the table on the next page, it very much reflects what Prue was just saying. There was a very low rate of increase. The SEND reforms came in 2014. For those first 3 years, Wokingham really didn't see the growth that you saw almost everywhere else, and that has now, if you like, that pent up latent hidden demand has been somewhat unleashed, which means there's been a really rocketing rate of growth in the last 3 years or so. And frankly, the systems were not set up and the provision wasn't set up to cope with that huge increase in demand, which is why probably we find ourselves in the safety, in that financial position, because it's not about over awarding of EHC plans locally. I would also say you would anticipate Woking would be below the national average, frankly, because it's a more affluent area and there's a strong correlation between indices of deprivation and high rates of SEN. So you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be at the national average. But I appreciate, perhaps should have given a bit more context on that slide, would have helped explain it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does indicate, and what it tells you, the story behind it is that we're kind of, that there has been hidden demand that has been, if you like, been catching up for the last 3 years, and that's caught the system somewhat by surprise. It wasn't prepared for that pace of growth of need.
Well, there'll certainly be many others who will raise that same concern.
Sorry, I think we talk about a high, massive increase in demand. The demand was always there, and it's not that it's suddenly gone poof. That the needs of the young people weren't being met, and now you're seeing it because you're actually trying to meet that need. So it's not that the individuals have changed and suddenly all need is, special schools. It was always there. It's just now you're acknowledging it. And I think it's important to understand that narrative as much. And I appreciate that it sees a high increase in your figures, but actually that need has always been present.
Absolutely, Sarah, and that's why I use the word sort of unmet or hidden demand. And I think the point's been made, you know, that there does need to be a little bit more sort of contextual sort of explanation here. So thank you for raising that, Ian. Andrew?
Yeah, I think it was kind of in relation to Ian's point, which I think was quite interesting when we were talking about, you know, what is good and the right number. From the discussion there, it sounds like we've got sort of conflicting ideas that actually, whilst we want to see the sort of the right number reflecting actually what is in there, whilst at the same time we've had the sort of safety valve saying we actually want better early intervention. So we're not bringing down the number of EHCPs, but almost flattening that curve, I guess, a little bit. And I'm just wondering where we get that balance of saying actually we want to be getting up to the right levels of sort of identifying EHCPs whilst also meeting what we were saying with the safety valve.
I'll have a go at answering that, and officers can follow me up. So what is important for me is that we meet the need. And if we can prevent the need escalating to the extent of getting an EHCP, that is better for everybody. It's better for us financially, but it's actually better for the child. And so I would hope we never get to the average, because that would mean that we'd failed in the early intervention and we weren't successfully doing that. So I can't say which it will be, but I hope that the driver is the needs of the child, not, and the safety valve, yes, it's a government thing that's inflicted on us, but actually that is also, in a way, it's driven us to the early intervention, which is in the interest of the child as well as the financial thing. So that's how I look at it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and earlier this evening there was a reference made to the Send Green paper for 2022, and there was a phrase there that has really resonated with me, and that's right support in the right places at the right times. You know, and you know, I think they're very, very important guiding principles. So, Andrew, do you have anything else to add to that?
Not massively. I think it just sort of comes back to that point where I guess there's no target percentages there. No, nothing is good or bad. You can read into either way of
Yeah, thank you. I would like, if people don't mind, to raise just a few very, very specific sort of points that might help to sort of add some value, you know, to this draft, and I'd like to go through them sort of in page numbers. So, page 39. There's under principles. There's a reference to embedding Send as everybody's business. And, you know, this is something which we've talked about before and understood the importance of, you know, many, many times. I'd like to suggest, though, that we add housing to that list. I'm not sure how others feel about that, but certainly in conversations that I've had with some of our older children, housing, you know, is and their parents, you know, housing has been a concern.
Well, I was hoping it was going to carry on, but can you add some context to that? How you would include housing? What are the impacts on housing? I'm not following yet.
Ian?
I might be able to help with that.
Yep.
A few years ago, we were looking at designs, right types of houses that needed to be built, like social housing that needed to be built. I asked for, and I think I got accepted, was that where you're building a house with X number of bedrooms in it, that the master bedroom should be made smaller and the children's bedrooms made a little bit bigger, so that every child could have a desk and a chair in their bedroom so they could do their homework in quiet and peace, not in the living room where other younger kids are running around causing disturbance.
Okay, moving on, page 40. Okay, there's an example of one of many references to the quality of EHCPs, which again, incredibly important issue. I believe that there are national criteria used to evaluate EHCPs. I'm just wondering, you know, whether it would be possible for these to be somehow identified, acknowledged, you know, in an appropriate manner within the strategy. So, just to sort of flesh out exactly what sort of things we mean when we are talking about the quality of EHCPs. I'm just wondering if anybody has any comments at all about that. No?
Go on, Terry. You go.
Well, my point, in terms of EHCPs, it's not just the actual quality of the EHCP itself, which is really key, because if you get that right, then hopefully everything else falls from it. But it's how you then assess whether the EHCP is working and whether a school is doing what it should be, and how that changes the plans, you know, in a continual cycle of assess, plan, do, review. So that, you know, it's a good plan, it's well written, and then it does what it says it does on the tin. And who's reviewing that, and who's making sure that, you know, who's holding the school to account to make sure that, you know, whether it's, you know, an OT turning up or a speech and language therapist turning up, and all those sorts of things. So it's not just getting the paperwork right, it's the whole process that needs to be right.
I think that's incredibly helpful, Terry. So if I could perhaps sort of amend my suggestion slightly, you know, to say if there are national criteria used to evaluate quality of EHCPs, could we also add in this document in an appropriate manner how the implementation, you know, of the EHCPs will be supported, monitored, reviewed, and so forth. So how it's actually then enacted.
And that also ties into your strengthening the preparing for adulthood, because that should start and be part of an integral part of any child's plan. But that's just those with plans. But like we were talking about earlier, it's also expanding that offer, isn't it, to other SEND children and young people, as Bruce said.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for the really interesting and important summary of some of the responses from the young people, children and young people through Me Too. All of those will have been, all of your comments will have been minuted. If there is any other statistical sort of evidence, you know, that we don't want to create a lot of sort of additional work, but if there's something that you've already got that's in a sort of an accessible manner, I think it would be very interesting, you know, for all the committee members to be able to cite that, because it was some pretty powerful things, you know, that you were feeding back. So that's a direct reference to sort of page 55, I think. The page 56, proposed strategic priorities. I can just turn to that. Oh, I've got a different page numbering. Okay, no, here we go. Okay, priority 1. Okay, inclusion and early intervention. Okay, I'd be very interested in views of any members of committee in bullet point 1, whether there should be specific reference to young people's voices. For example, the SEND Youth Council, who again we mentioned earlier, you know, again in our meeting tonight. Any comments or questions at all about that, or is it something that, Jonathan, you might want to consider?
I think certainly, I think an area for growth and development we're all recognising is having wider reach in terms of young people's engagement. I think the group that came and presented at Overview and Scrutiny a few months back, that was really powerful, but we also need to ensure we're reaching out to the Youth Council and to other forums and fora to make sure we're getting that full spectrum of views. And I think we are certainly working on increasing that reach and also making it a more regular. It's not something we do, you know, you can get a level of cynicism from young people if you only consult when you're doing a strategy. We need to make it a part of the ongoing conversation we have with them, and we definitely recognise that and definitely want to see that built in, and that will be captured and enshrined in the strategy.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, priority number 3. Okay, I'm just wondering, under smart commissioning, whether it might be appropriate to add a specific reference to partnership working as well. Perhaps we don't need to discuss that tonight, but if I can just plant that idea, because it is something which, you know, I know, you know, we consider to be very important. Stakeholder page 63, stakeholder engagement. Under task and finish groups, I'd just like to go back to the some of the discussion we had earlier about transitions to adulthood, with acknowledging all the things that were said around around that, including inclusion of children who are in the mainstream schools as well. So I don't know, task and finish group to perhaps look at transitions to adulthood.
I think
Jonathan?
we do already have a group focusing on that. I think we should perhaps ensure it's reflected in the document. As I say, this was the headlines, if you like. So I've missed some detail in here, I must admit. But there is a working group, and Sarah's Send Voices represented on it, and it's having a good look at our we call it PFA, preparation for adulthood arrangements, including those in mainstream, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay. And my last comment is on page 64, governance. I'm being really cheeky. Where does Send Voices fit into that chart? And sorry, Ming?
Yeah, actually, we just now we talked about working in the same partnership as a sister leadership group. Same is sitting in that board. Sister partnership is quite robust. We used to have a wide range of people, more internal number. Now we reduce the number to make sure the people who make key decisions who are system leader, including same voice, Sarah sitting on the board.
Okay, so perhaps if the membership of that partnership could be sort of elaborated, made clear, that would be grand. Helen, were you wanting to add something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to stress also that we have a co-chaired SEND strategic partnership, and we've got Lila, who's just come on camera, who co-chairs from so we very much got health colleagues co-chairing this board. So wanted really to bring that out also for the benefit of this committee. Thank you.
That's wonderful, and welcome, Lila. We really appreciate you being here this evening, and I hope you found the discussion interesting and helpful. Are there any quick comments that you would like to make to the committee?
I think all the issues that have been discussed we very much agree with, and obviously we're working very closely with Helen and Jonathan around improvement plans. I don't think Nikki and I have got anything more to add than what Jonathan has already responded to.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions from members? If not, as I want, I would like to suggest a few recommendations. So can we go to the recommendations? Okay, so the first recommendation is that the committee expresses its thanks to all of the officers and all of the partners, who have been involved, in the production of this this iteration of the new SEND strategy. The next recommendation would be along the lines that transition to adulthood, be included in the forward programme for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I would imagine that would involve, the WBC transition team, but I'm also very cognizant, of the comments that were made about the need to include other children, in that process. So just for the moment, some sort of general recommendation, that we explore transition to adulthood in one of our next meetings.
Would it be a good idea to include the transition team and maybe an update from the working group that sits under the safety valve for preparing for adulthood, and then hopefully that might cover both cohorts?
I can see Jonathan's nodding. That sounds like a very good suggestion. You'd be happy with that, Jonathan, and other officers? Thank you for that, Sarah. Okay. And so we can talk about sort of timings for that at a later stage. Okay. The next recommendation, okay, is actually to do with something which I should have raised. It's in the report, but we didn't discuss it. There are a number of references in this report to concerns that concerns relating to supports offered for schools and other school-related matters. These are matters to do that arise out of government policy, as I understand it. So, an example, I'm not being very articulate, I'm sorry, but an example of this would be concerns that were raised by a number of schools about access to specialist support. Okay, as an example, but there are other examples cited as well. So I'd like us to consider a recommendation along this line, and that is that the leader of the council be requested to raise the matter of limited access to specialist support and any other related matters, okay, with nearby council leaders with a view to lobbying government on the nature of the issues and possible remedies. This is partly our role as a lobbying council, which we're treating very seriously. And as this is something that has appeared in the strategy, I'm wondering, whether it's something that might be worth consideration. Prue and then Sarah.
Thank you. I was going to say that the most fundamental problem here, apart from workforce issues to do with not having enough specialists in particular things, is the low level of funding of our education system. And that's why we're part of the F40 group, who have just, it's gone out to all schools, in fact, just done a letter to ministers following there's a session in House of Commons, not in House of Commons, but in the House of Parliament for MPs to inform them about low level of funding. And I think it's 37 MPs, sadly none of ours, signed a letter to the ministers saying that something has to be done to address the underfunding of some parts of the education system, including that would include us as an F40 member, because that is the fundamental problem that we have. Our funding is so low. That's why we've got a huge overspend in the high needs block, because high needs block is calibrated as part of the school's funding, and they just don't have enough money. So that bit is already ongoing. But I do think there's something to be said for doing it on a more Berkshire-wide level. And I know the county councils network have been lobbying government in the same way, particularly because councils are all overspending on SEND and on children's social care, both of which arise from chronic underfunding of the system, not because councils being profligate with the money. So there is a lot of work that can be done on that, but there's a slightly different issue with the shortages of experts is because there are not enough people who are trained to do it, who are willing to work for the wages that they're offered, which I can quite understand. So there's a chronic shortage of some of these people, and that needs to be, I think, probably addressed by the leader of the council. That would be a very helpful way to do it, because it's actually getting the government to think about their training programs and the pay scales and that kind of thing, because we can't go on as we are, and I don't know what we're going to do about teaching assistants, because they are leaving in droves because they can get more money working on a till, and they don't get assaulted by the people in the supermarket, or at least not quite as regularly as they get attacked by pupils or overworked, under distressed, emotionally worn out by the pressure of trying to do that job we don't pay them anything like enough, and so the whole system can fall apart if you can't actually get the people to do all these things that are in the HCP.
Thanks for that. I'll come to you in a minute, Ian. Okay, it's really interesting to hear that S40 have already written to MPs on this matter. If I understood you correctly, did you say that there could be value in the leader of the council doing something along similar lines with other local council leaders?
Yes,
sort of
Yeah,
reach?
there are
Okay.
two aspects. There's the Berkshire leaders have a meeting which they could discuss education, but there's also I think they're calling it the Berkshire Prosperity something or other, which is like a replacement for the LEP, and actually the skills thing and the workforce issues might be raised under that banner. But yes, I would certainly welcome, I think, and I'm sure Stephen would be very happy to support us going forward with that kind of thing.
Ian?
Yeah, I'm not sure about doing it locally, given that what you said, that none of our MPs actually backed us, because I think we would need them to back the local leaders. I wonder if it's better to do it through the LGA, because this is not a local problem, it's a national problem.
The LGA is already doing it, or the district councils are not involved, but the county council network, which is the main thing, is doing it already. They are engaged with government intensively on both sides of the funding, because SEND is part of it, but social care is also, children's social care is well underfunded, and they're also campaigning on that. So I think we can do more to engage with our MPs locally. We can continue to fight that battle.
Okay, so Graham?
Yeah, I was going to say that pulling colour apart, when I was doing Prue's role, a lot of my time was spent arguing with the Department of Education on the same issues and all of the other partners that we've talked about. And I don't think that whatever the colour is at Westminster, that situation is going to change or be different. What I would suggest, though, is rather than open up what potentially could be a political mire by having the leaders getting together, that we're quite specific in what we're going to ask the leader of the council to do in getting collection of data and opinion from our other local leaders. And they are all different colours, and so hopefully we would get a more collegiate view on what's right for Berkshire. I don't know what people might think about that.
Okay. I certainly would be very happy with that as a sort of a first or a next step, in the process. Okay, so the recommendation would be to ask the leader of the council to speak formally with leaders in neighbouring councils through whatever that group is. Okay, plus also the prosperity group that Prue mentioned.
Can I also add in that we do, we're part of the Southeast group. So there's, I've forgotten how many authorities, somebody will tell me, 19, thank you. And I do talk to my counterparts in Berkshire, most of them. And we've been having meetings with them sort of on a single basis. Most of us are, we're in the safety valve. I think Windsor and Maidenhead are in the delivering better value. Bracknell, I think, have been invited into safety valve now. So we're all in the same boat, I think. And it's just getting information out of Reading on their finances is slightly more tricky. Yes, they are DBV, but they're hived off because they have the separate organisation that deals with children's services, which makes it quite opaque. Although they work with us on some things, they don't have the same level of transparency that the other councils have. But yeah, I mean, we're all in a similar boat. So I think collecting that data, yes, yes, yep. And we could go next door to Oxfordshire, who are in severe problems with this, and I really would like to be them. At the moment, they've just had a joint air inspection, and disaster has struck them, and nearly all their senior staff have left, and all sorts of things. The lead member wouldn't resign, and as a result of which they've lost their administration.
Okay, I think we're kind of getting a bit off track.
But so I think there's a lot to be said for Graham's idea of trying to collate some data across Berkshire.
Yeah. Okay, so we can tweak the wording for the recommendation, and I think once we've agreed, once we've got some draft wording, we can circulate it to all members of the committee just to see that everybody is happy, you know, with that. It'd be Sarah and then Andrew.
Sorry, just to say that there are several national programmes at work, particularly around workforce, because that is a national issue, and retaining the workforce as well, because people are leaving it. And also you have got the regional programmes of the change programme, which is part of the SEND review that you were talking about earlier. So it's also useful to keep an eye on those activities that are going on, because it's likely to be the programmes that will come through.
So I just wanted clarification what, because we had a long discussion on what the recommendation is. Are we talking about sort of local funding, or are we talking about lobbying for increased pure pupil funding going directly to schools, or is it? It seemed a bit. I can sympathise with kind of both, but I wonder whether that's just a bit sort of. I don't know whether it needs to be more specific.
Right, so I think if we stick to the recommendation being about data gathering for the time being, that might be helpful. The county councils network are asking for an immediate emergency injection of funds into councils that have children's services in order to stop them falling over, essentially. So that's a slightly different point, but that's what they're actually asking for. So not to change the funding formula, but actually bail us out before we all keel over. I don't think we're not about to keel over, everybody. No, we're okay. So it's tight, but yeah.
Graham?
Yeah, I'm very quickly going to support, perhaps with slightly different semantics. I don't know if you've ever read a book called Marketing Warfare, but the first thing that you have to do with reconnaissance is gather the data and work out who your allies are, right? And who's got similar problems to us. And then we can work out who we go lobbying with. But that's the game, as I would see it.
Okay. And I would still like to propose that we ask the leader of the council, you know, to initiate, you know, that data gathering. So, yeah. Sorry. I do apologise. I didn't have the microphone on. Okay, so agenda item 49, the schools update. Okay. Who will be presenting that item? Gillian.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening, Gillian.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
So ahead of your message to remind me that everybody has had the documentation.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things to draw to colleagues' attention in that actually slightly different report this evening, in that we've had no Ofsted inspections in the reporting framework for tonight's report to you. So the report is slightly different, and I've provided you with a little bit of information about the work of the team that I just thought I'd bring to life for you. I wanted to celebrate the census data and the kind of diversity within the borough. So just to highlight to you those figures around the percentage of children that we have from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups now within the borough, sitting at over 40%. And the number of children who speak English as an additional language being at over 23% in the borough now, and that we have over 114 different languages spoken within schools in the borough, and that actually raises to 141 if you take all the varieties of each different language. So you get a sense of the absolute diversity across our school population currently. I'm sure you're thinking, you know, what communities does that figure represent? So the most spoken language in the borough at the moment is Chinese, followed by Urdu, running through then to Hindi, Arabic, Telugu, Polish, Tamil and Romanian. And in terms of that Chinese element and maybe Cantonese sitting within there, just wanted to highlight to colleagues that we actually have the highest percentage in the Southeast region of Hong Kong national overseas families who've joined us per population in the Southeast. So our percentage of those families is running at 2.5%, which is the highest in the Southeast as an authority. And in the last 12 months, we've admitted over 800 children from those families into our schools, and that's what since the 2021 census. So just to draw to colleagues' attention and to celebrate that diversity that we have in schools, and you'll see in the report there some of the commentary that we have from the work that the partnership team have been doing with school colleagues around equality, diversity, and the impact that that's been having, and the feedback from schools and our stakeholder group. So I'll leave it at that, Chair, and take questions.
Thank you, Gillian. Do any members have questions? Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. Looking at the sort of the bits about aspects of racial equality in schools, and on page 71 about dealing with racist incidents. I was wondering if there's kind of a framework where an oversight across all schools, where we sort of have an idea of what the picture is across all schools. And I know it's complex with not all schools being under local authority control, but whether there is an overall picture about what it's looking like in different schools, because I think it's a really important issue, and I know it's certainly not perfect across the borough.
Thank you. It's a really great question. There is a requirement for head teachers to report to their governing bodies on any racial incidents and to provide that reporting into that framework, but there is no further onward reporting to the local authority required for community maintained schools or for academy schools. So it's not a set of data that we're actually in possession of. So this information that we have from our stakeholder groups and our soft intelligence is the most intelligence that we have and are able to share.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any way within the remit that sort of data can be shared on a thing like that, or is it only for governors? Because as I say, I think it is quite an important element, and I know there's certain other data which is shared across the local authority, and whether that is one thing which could form part of it.
And so it would be something that we would have to insert into a data sharing arrangement with schools, and then we'd have to consult on that with schools for them to be able to share that information with us.
Yeah, Prue?
Again, on a long-term sort of strategic aim, through the Borough Education Partnership, we're trying to work on how we do better data sharing. And so this is the kind of thing that ultimately we would like to get to, but we're not there yet, but we're making the first steps on the road. Looking at Ming's face, I think that's probably
Yep. Now, that's a really interesting answer or comment, Prue, because I was going to suggest, that the Borough Education Partnership might be a body, that could engage with schools, and encourage, sharing of this really important data. I believe I may be correct in saying that there was a time in the past, when data was collected, by the local authority. Yeah, but that is no longer the case. If we can find a way, of addressing that issue, I think that would be, really, really useful. So thank you for raising that really important point, Andrew. Graham.
Perhaps I can just try and add some context of my experience. So when we first looked at it, we were going through a period of academisation. And so therefore what they had as their information was theirs. And then, of course, this got more and more complicated as every individual in the room had a different interpretation as to what GDPR was. Yeah, so the BEP certainly understands it, because I remember having discussions with various heads on it, and it's understood, but as Prue says, it's complex.
It's a question of trusting each other and trusting us. and we're building that relationship to get to that point where there's a lot of data that we could beneficially share, and I think we will get there, but it will take a bit of time.
Right, well, that's really positive, to hear. I was really pleased to see this this section celebrating diversity, in your report. I found it really, really interesting, Gillian, and thank you for including it. I did notice on page 71 there's a reference to a protocol for approaching discriminatory incidents and issues. I don't know whether, that was a protocol from just one particular school, or whether there is some sort of WBC borough-wide protocol. If it's from one school, if they were willing, I think it would be very interesting for members of the committee, to actually be able to cite, an exemplar. Just so that we've got a better sort of understanding of how at least one school, is addressing the issues. So perhaps if I could leave that one with you. But
yeah.
Is that okay, Gillian?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Are there any other questions at all? Ian and then Graham.
So just a quick observation. I was looking at, sorry, it's page 75. It's not actually got a number on it, but it lists Wokingham schools. I just wondered if we could, it's listed, I think, in order of trusts by alphabetical order. It might be more useful to list it by inspection grade so that we can focus our attention. But I've just realised that maybe those one-word inspection grade terms are probably about to all change. But I'm not sure.
We can do that, and actually, I don't know what format the Modern Gov system throws that out to you as councillors, but when it goes into the system, it's an Excel sheet, so it should be sortable if it arrives to you in that format. If not, I can get it to you in a format that could be sortable as an Excel spreadsheet. So you could change the order of the schools.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And Graham?
Yeah, I was trying to get a private answer, but for the sake of the committee, on page 67 in outstanding schools, it says as of August 23, we have 7 schools awaiting inspection under the new guidance who were previously judged as being outstanding. Great. Additionally, the hospital school. I didn't know we had one.
Indeed, it is the CAM. So CAMS Phoenix is a pupil referral unit which is based at Wokingham Community Hospital. The complexity in its establishment is that whilst it's a pupil referral unit, the only people who are able to refer children into it are actually NHS medics, so consultants refer in because it is a CAMS tiered service, and historically the children who attend that educational provision are actually inpatients or patients of the CAMS service. And it's based at the community hospital. It's currently over at Prospect Park in Reading because building work is happening, and they've been temporarily relocated since March of this year, and we're anticipating that they will be coming back across to the community hospital site, hopefully by the end of this month.
Thank you for that kind clarification. I always knew it under CAMS, so that's what confused me.
Sorry, before that, agenda item 50, the executive member update, Prue.
Nearly everything I was going to talk about is probably covered in the agenda. There's one piece of good news which we didn't cover under the safety valve, which is that we have had our second of the 3 safety valve payments this year. So the safety valve is structured. We had a largest payment as we entered the programme in March, at the end of March. Then for each of the next few years, we get 1.72 million a year knocked off our deficit in 3 tranches a year. And you have to report to the DFE, get your report signed off, and then they will give you the money. And we've just heard we've had our second lot. and we're back on the treadmill to prepare the next report for December, and then we'll hopefully get money in the new year. So that it's been a huge effort by a lot of people, because it's a rapidly moving picture. Our information management systems have not, well, they're still not perfect, but we have now got data that we feel confident in, so that we've captured everything, and we're starting to capture the stuff that's in the pipeline coming through, so that we can predict more accurately what is going to happen. That's been one of the issues that we've had traditionally. So it's a long way to go with that, but it's coming along. The other thing that's happened, I think, since the last meeting is that the Indigo Send resource-based unit thing at Maiden Early School has formally opened. And that was operating before, but it's now up to full capacity of 25 students. And it's a lovely thing. I mean, the property services oversaw the refurbishment. They did it in double quick time. I think the planning application went through and whiz bang, there it was. It's a building that was previously called the Silverdale Centre, which was a very interesting and not very lovely building. And they've done it really well, and you would not recognise it as the same place. And the children that were in the unit had a say as to how the furniture should be configured and that kind of thing. So it fits them very well, and it looks very good. And the only other thing I think I want to say, and it's at a very early stage, but it's coming, is we have started on the recruitment of a permanent director of children's services. So watch this space to see how that goes. We've got a timetable now, I think, for the shortlisting and the interviews. But at the moment, I know nothing more than the advert's gone out and we have got some interest. So it's quite a significant step. It's not a reflection on Helen. Helen has been with us for nearly 2 years. Has been doing an excellent job. I think the team is really working well together. Significant signs of progress on all fronts, through battling through some interesting times. And this is an opportunity where we make sure we get the right person to fit that role, and continue the forward momentum. And I don't think there's really much else to say at this point.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Prue. And moving on to agenda item 51, now the forward programme. So if we turn to page 77 in the agenda pack, I think in light of the discussion of the earlier agenda item on the draft SEND strategy, I think it would be good if we could, if there is a sort of a latest iteration, of that strategy available for the 8th of January meeting. I think that would be, very useful, for us to look at. I think also, in light of earlier discussion, that we would benefit from inviting or having an agenda item relating to transitions to adulthood, with all the caveats that were mentioned earlier. Okay, so that would involve the transitions to adulthood team, but quite possibly others, as well. And I'd like to suggest the 20th of March for that.
Could I make a recommendation in that we have safety to valve update as part of our rolling programme, whether or not we could include a general update and then maybe have more information on each of the working groups and rotate it through? Would that be of interest, so that everybody understood the detail behind it?
Ming, do you think that might be possible? Just a very brief update from each of it's 4 streams, isn't it?
Yeah.
not necessarily each meeting, but have a focus on each meeting on one of the
Oh, I
streams.
beg your pardon.
So you
Okay.
get a broad update and then have a focus on a particular area and rotate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think we can focus on particular strand work stream. Next one, we just mentioned earlier, we want to bring back draft thing strategy for January. Yes, probably we can focus on the draft.
Yeah,
thing strategy. Actually, that's one of the work stream as well. And then the next one, we can focus on something else. Yeah.
Okay. Does that?
Saying that we're not having the same staff update, but
Sorry.
are you suggesting that we just have the same strategy?
Yeah, I think that would relate it. The two things are related. I think that we can just focus on just the same strategy.
Just the same strategy.
Yeah.
Is that what the committee wants?
I'm not comfortable with that. You know, I'd like the SEND strategy, you know, as a separate agenda item, and then safety value to continue as a standing item, but each meeting to include, so there'll be an overview of the safety value valve, and then a focus on one of the work streams. So would people be in agreement with that? Do you think that's possible from an officer point of view, Ming?
Yeah, it is possible. We can under the safety valve structure update for next one because of the timing, we have to bring the draft thing structure back to this forum. So next time under safety valve update, we can have a draft thing strategy. Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've understood that. We can email on one another on that. Okay. Thank you. So 20th of March, transitions to adulthood. And I cannot recall when the last meeting of our meetings with the Youth Council was. Okay. But I think we do need, you know, we really, but, sorry? Oh, sorry, Helen. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points from me. There's something for me, I think about balancing the agenda and having a balance with some of the other work of children's services, including a lot of the transformation work that we're currently working on. So if the committee would bear with us, I'd like a day or two to actually come back with some suggestions. We do have some challenges around the medium-term financial plan, the capital programme, and a number of other items. Other things that we're working on, we're looking to develop a refresh of the children and young people's strategy. And it would be very helpful to come to this committee in its overview function early doors on that. So whether that's January or March, I think it would be really helpful to do that. So I'm happy for us to go away as a leadership team and to come back with some further suggestions if that meets with the committee's endorsement. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd certainly be very happy with that. And if you could come back with recommended timings, you know, for each of those items. Richard?
I seem to remember a safeguarding report from the regional, I think it was my first meeting, and I don't see that's on the programme.
Okay. So that's the Berkshire Safeguarding Partnership, isn't it? So, right. So if we can check when that was. Thank you, Richard. Okay. Okay, so I think perhaps the best way to approach this is when we hear back from Helen with agenda items, possible agenda items and timings, plus you know, we'll do a bit of research about the Berkshire Safeguarding Board annual report as well, and then we'll get back to members with some suggestions you know, for the forward programme. Yeah. Jane?
Quick one, Andrew. The meeting on the 8th of January, is that the right date? Because it's normally a Wednesday meeting and that's a Monday.
It's not set on a particular day of the week.
Oh, is it not? They just happen to have been the ones I've been to. Okay.
Well spotted, though. I'm impressed. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that's the forward programme. Item 52, the action tracker. I don't know if anybody has any comments at all about the action tracker. I'd like to thank Lucienne for updating, for keeping this updated. There are a few items, particularly from the 20th of June, that are still appearing as ongoing, but I think they've now been updated and completed. Okay, so I'll perhaps, if it's okay, sort of email you, you know, with those. Okay, but otherwise, I think it's pretty accurate. Ian.
When they're done, completed, how long are we going to leave them on there before we drop them off? Again, interested in concentrating people's mind on as few words as possible.
Do members have any thoughts about that? This is an initiative, you know, it's a relatively new initiative. I'm not sure whether we made any formal decision, you know, about how long it would be, but I think the intent was that it would be kind of a rolling tracker. Prue?
I was just going to say that when we have the action plans and we complete the actions in the officer type realm, as it were, periodically we kind of sweep them out and stick them on the bottom so that you've got a smaller section of what you've got still in hand, but that you keep a record of what you've completed so that you know where you've been. You can actually see that you have done some things.
Yeah, but it's still then a question of what gets reported to the committee. You don't want in 5 years' time.
No, so I think you should have at the end of the year. At the end of the municipal year, you should wipe off all the things you've done and start again. But if there's any that need to carry forward, you carry them forward.
Yeah. Thank you for raising that. I think we'll turn our minds to it, you know, and try to come up with sort of a workable suggestion, you know, which we'll bring back to the committee before any decision is made. Yeah. So thank you for that. So agenda item 53, part 2, exclusion of the public. That under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the